From the year that brought you Space Jam 2, killed Betty White, and gave us the Omicron variant comes some actually decent movies. Hi, I'm Emerald.
I'm Henry.
And this is
The Spotlight.
It's been a somewhat bizarre year for movies. A ton of movies actually came out this year, but for whatever reason it feels like nothing came out this year. Unless you're a massive fan of the Big Red Dog cinematic universe, then I guess the world is a wish-granting factory.
But for as underwhelming as the movie scene was this year, compared to something like 2019 or 2017, we did get quite a few gems. Some might say uncut gems. Today we'll take a look at the top 21 best movies of the year.
Of course, this whole list is subjective, but we'll try to explain why these movies work so well for us, and maybe why they weren't placed higher. We'll keep it spoiler-free unless we really need to talk about a plot point, in which case we'll give you a spoiler warning in that segment. Also, we're not covering any movies released after December 10th because I say so. Even though I like No Way Home, because fuck you guys.
Anyways, we'll be going through the first 11 pretty fast.
I am Speed.
But we'll slow down and talk more about the top 10. Enough intro, let's get into...
Starting out at number 21, it's Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. And it is surprisingly fantastic. It's one of the few Marvel movies that I really like, despite it checking every box in the Marvel formula list. It's generic for sure, but it does a good job with all of the things that it tries to do.
The fight choreography is really good, and a lot of the fights feel really intense and intimate. It's definitely the best the MCU has ever been at showing hand-to-hand combat. The third act drags the movie down a lot, but the characters and direction are enough to keep it on this list. At number 20, we got Pig. Now, I think Nick Cage is a good actor, but in this movie, he's actually trying for a serious character. If you can get past the fact that we're dealing with a Nick Cage movie, this film is pretty fucking fantastic. It's a slow burn and an emotional drama where truffle hunter Nick Cage wants to get his truffle pig back.
This one, we can't talk about too much without unpacking the ending, but suffice it to say that I think Pig is an actual serious movie, and I think it's really good and has some stunning direction. Also, the relationship between Nick Cage and his pig is one of the best relationships of the year. Sorry, Annette. Number 19, it's Malignant. And wait, before you rage click off this video, keep in mind, Malignant is not perfect. It's pretty fucked if you treat it objectively. Either you love the first two acts but hate the third, or literally the opposite. Or at least that's what it looks like if you look at letterboxd. Anyways, maybe I'm just a James Wan chill, but I think that the whole movie is actually pretty good. Yeah, it goes off the rails, but that's kind of the point, right?
The movie is stunningly shot, as expected with a James Wan film. Some of the best cinematography in a horror movie in a long time. The story feels like an homage to shitty 2000s slasher movies, especially in the third act. And as a fan of shitty slasher movies, I feel seen. It's a fucking blast if you're willing to try and enjoy it.
At number 18, we find The Suicide Squad. So in 2016, David Ayer's Suicide Squad came out, and it made everyone feel like they'd been waterboarded by a schizophrenic clown.
To this handsome honka.
The only character people seemed to genuinely like was Harley Quinn, as well as a small contingent of people who die by Will Smith's Deadshot.
Ah, that's hot.
I don't get you guys. So anyways, the studio saw that and was like, okay, I guess we'll do a sequel. Let's get the guy who directed Guardians to direct it, since Marvel makes a lot of money, and we like money. Because WB will never stop trying to squeeze cash out of Harley Quinn, apparently.
Hey guys, sorry I'm late. Had to go number 2.
Good to know.
But surprise, surprise, they ended up making one of the better superhero movies to be released in a while. Now, I'm a fan of the DCEU, and I actually like darker, less campy superhero movies. Of course, I like the MCU, but sometimes I get tired of the constant witty jokes. I actually enjoy the dynamic of DC having the serious movies, and Marvel having all the comedies. The Suicide Squad kind of subverts this, because it's a really Marvel-y DC movie. The key difference is that they gave it an R rating, which is one of the few truly great ideas that Warner Brothers has had, ever, because James Gunn has always had a brilliant sense of comedy, but he really comes into his own here. Giving him the freedom to do the most brutal shit with his traditional quick, witty talk is a fucking fantastic idea, and it turned out great. The surprise aspect of this movie, however, was a surprisingly emotional story and characters that you actually care about. The Suicide Squad may be Gunn's best work to date. 17 is A Quiet Place Part 2. Now, I was hesitant with this one. Jim from The Office said that he didn't really want to direct a sequel, and I get that, because the first Quiet Place had a really solid ending and didn't really need a sequel. But he said he found a way to make the sequel work, and oh my god, he did. First of all, the movie is one of the single best-looking horror movies to come out in ages. Shooting the film on 35mm anamorphic lens is an inspired choice, and it brings so much character to the screen. The color grading is another underrated aspect of the movie. Just the way everything looks and how each scene has its own color and feeling is outstanding. Each different set piece feels new and exciting, especially when the last movie mostly took place in one location.
In terms of performances, John Krasinski does fine for his screen time, and I don't hate his reinsertion into the story. Emily Blunt absolutely kills it, and even the annoying whiny kid is fine. Cillian Murphy's good too, but the absolute star of this movie is Millicent Simmons. She sells her character completely and brings so much life to Regan. Her arc in this story is just fantastic, and she's quickly becoming one of my favorite actors in her age group. In terms of scares, there's a few fairly contrived or cliched beats, which is why this movie doesn't rank higher. If you've seen it, you probably know what I'm talking about. But a lot of them are really effective. I really like the segment in the middle where Millicent Simmons is all by herself and we're put into her shoes with no audio. That section has some great tension, and also the opening sequence is just one of the best horror openings in a long time, although it's not the scariest, strictly speaking. This is just a kick-ass horror sequel with some solid representation and gorgeous directing. Plus, the ending is just fantastic. Really strong sequel, I did not expect to like it as much as I did.
Sliding in at number 16 is Dune, and okay, I don't like this movie as much as some people do. I've read the book, so I got most of it, but honestly, I think it's not a super great adaptation. We're currently working on a video series about adaptations, so we've been thinking a lot about them, and this movie just doesn't do it. Because, while I got what was going on, people who haven't read the book have no fucking clue what's happening. I can't get into it much without going into spoilers, but this movie is very challenging to understand. It doesn't give you enough exposition about the story to fully grasp it without having read the book, which is bizarre since the first bit of this movie is literally just people telling exposition to each other. And while I enjoyed it, I think that a good adaptation needs to have much better storytelling. Also, this movie has a lot of weird scenes. There are parts that you think should be a lot more emotional, but they get undercut by immediately moving on to the next action set piece without giving time for whatever plot event to sit. The climax of the movie is weirdly small. The scale of this movie is huge, with a massive city-destroying space fight, but the movie ends with some poorly shot, underwhelming action.
Also, the cast doesn't get to do much. It's star-studded and has great performances, but no one really gets any time to do anything on account of there being too many characters and not enough runtime. Now, you might be asking why we spent so much time shit-talking a movie that's in the top 21. It's because there's so many good aspects. This movie is a spectacle on the level of Interstellar, and I'm here for it. There's not much to say that hasn't been said already, but it's a gorgeously shot movie, true to the book, even if it could afford to be a bit better with explaining it. With great performances from actors that actually have screen time. The effects are stunning, the score is one of Zimmer's best, and it's an all-around great time. Although I pray to God that it doesn't get any significant wins at the Golden Globes, because it is still a big dumb blockbuster. But sometimes, a big dumb blockbuster is just a fun time.
At 15, we find Encanto. Now, I'm not the hugest fan of some of Disney's animated movies. They haven't been super great for a while, with some key exceptions. Disney really enjoys just making cash grab movies to get their product placement money.
Wow, look at all this stuff.
And all those sequel movies are kinda dog shit. Even Raya, which should have been an easy slam dunk, was just kinda meh.
But another surprise, Disney has apparently remembered how to make good, decent movies. This one has a really strong story with pretty decent characters, and of course, beautiful animation. I guess the huge budget comes with the worker exploitation, and the songs in this one are just fantastic. Nothing quite as memorable as the Moana soundtrack, or even Frozen, but it's certainly better than the latter sequel. And Surface Pressure is an actual banger.
Pressure like a drip, drip, drip that'll never stop. Whoa.
I'm gonna come.
Anyways, this movie is just really powerful in portraying its themes of belonging, expectations, and family. It's an all-around home run from a studio that's been, struggling. Lamb is our pick for number 14, and there's not much we can say about it without spoiling it. See, this is a movie that you really do have to watch blind. Anyways, we like it a lot, although the community is pretty divided, because this movie doesn't do much. It's mostly just things happening to people with very little formal plot. Now, that can work, but this movie isn't really a comedy, and it's not really a drama, and it's not really a horror movie. We're actually working on a video right now talking about the really weird genre of this movie.
It makes a lot more sense once you read about what Vladimir Johnson had in mind with this movie. The themes are there if you look for them. Besides that, it's an immaculately shot film with a really cute animal friend. What more could you ask for from a movie? At number 13, another movie that you forgot technically came out this year, Judas and the Black Messiah. Remember when we got a stupid movie with Fred Hampton as a character, but he was grossly misinterpreted by a shitty director who insists on writing leftist and centrist liberals? Now we get a redo with an actual Fred Hampton character.
Deputy Chairman Fred Hampton of the Illinois Black Panther Party.
Shaka King is a student of Spike Lee, and you can really tell with the style and commentary of this movie. This film is one of the more exciting movies to come out this year, although as I learned from experience, don't watch it with white people over the age of 50. That was one of the worst experiences of my life. Maybe second to watching Moonlight with my parents. Anyways, this movie slaps.
This movie is about a sad theater kid, and it's really touching and emotional. It manages to not drag despite having a 3-hour runtime. The relationship between the two leads is really well developed and feels natural. Again, the 3 hours we spend with them helps.
It's just really solid. Good writing, good characters, and really good directing that manages to make it feel shorter than it is. And the main relationship is almost as good as Nick Cage plus his pig. Come On, Come On is number 11. In this film, the Joker has a glow-up after hanging out with his nephew, and that's literally all I'm gonna say for this one.
So I guess I'll finish the review then. Mike Mills has a very good understanding of children. He doesn't write them simply, he understands the complexity of their character. In a word, this film is compassionate. It has stunning direction, and naturally, Joaquin Phoenix pulls out all the stops. This movie should definitely be in the top 10, but Emerald would not budge on his number 10 spot. So I guess we'll have to talk about that shit show now.
Boy, am I gonna get hate for this. Alright, let's just rip off the band-aid. The number 10 pick goes to Zack Snyder's Justice League. And I know what you're thinking. How can you justify a fucking 4-hour-long Zack Snyder pretentious comic book movie above actual films like Judas and the Black Messiah or Come On, Come On? Anyways, this movie is the number 10 movie of the year, and we like it a lot.
Look, this movie is flawed. Almost every movie on this list so far has been, strictly speaking, a better movie. This fucker has a 4-hour runtime and the plot is shaky, and it's got quite a few Snyderisms that are kind of annoying. But god damn it, this movie deserves its place. After years upon years of cyberbullying Warner Bros. On social media, we finally got our Snyder cut. As a fan of DC Comics and a Snyderverse apologist, I have never in my life been more excited to see a movie. Hands down. I'm a Marvel shill, and I see the MCU movies opening night every time. And I was more hyped for the Snyder Cut than I was for fucking Avengers Endgame. Leading up to it, I watched the trailer daily. That teaser was my fucking Bible for a while. So maybe it's the fan goggles. Maybe I'm a DC shill. But boy did this movie deliver. So yeah, I'm putting this movie so high because, well, I was a part of the movement asking to release it, and I was so excited to watch it. But you know what? This is my list. I say what I want.
DC has rarely been able to balance tones. Sometimes it's too dark, and sometimes WB forces a tone that's too light. The Snyder Cut finds the happy medium between a more serious tone, but not taking itself too seriously. Unlike BVS, the Snyder Cut has quite a few jokes, and they don't actually feel out of place like they do in Suicide Squad or the Justice League.
Wonder Woman. What do you think, man? You think she'd ever go for a younger guy?
She's 5,000 years old, Barry.
The tone is really serious and darker, but the team still feels campy enough to be an actual superhero team.
Obviously, the best part of this movie is the characters. It's really difficult to successfully introduce a whole superhero team without giving each one their own movie, and while a 4-hour runtime certainly helps, the characters here feel really fleshed out. Giving the Flash some new scenes gives some new context, and obviously giving him more to do in the finale is really important. Aquaman and Wonder Woman get their own scene together, which, you know, wasn't a thing in the original, outside of...
You're gorgeous and fierce and strong and...
And the biggest change, of course, is Cyborg. He has a backstory, motivation, an arc, and an explanation of his powers. Cyborg serves as the emotional through line that connects the whole story together, which is especially obvious in the final recording from his dad. This movie just feels so fleshed out. It's funny, the story works, and fuck, even the villain is pretty good.
The presentation is pretty stellar, although it's probably up to personal taste. Some people hate the 4:3 aspect ratio, some people hate the almost black and white color tones, but I personally think it's really cool. The shots are really amazing and the CGI looks great. Mostly. And there's really not a lot to complain about.
If you haven't seen this film because you hated the original or can't find the time, I really think you should check this movie out. It's not perfect, but it's a fantastic piece of film that delivers to fans what they've been waiting for ages. It's a good standalone movie and improves on the good parts of BVS. It's just a good time. Maybe not strictly the 10th best movie to come out this year, but after being blocked by big Hollywood for so long, it deserves to be in the spotlight.
Hey wait, that's the name of the channel.
At number 9 is one of the best dramas since The Sound of Metal. It's Coda, winning Audience Choice and Grand Jury at the Sundance this year. You can bet this dramedy is one of the best to come out in a long time. The premise, a child of deaf adults, is fairly self-explanatory. The story of a girl who wants to sing but has an entirely deaf family that she's been translating for is fucking fantastic, and calls attention to an issue that I had no idea even existed.
First of all, this movie is hilarious. With a movie with such a strong emotional core, sometimes you forget that the thing can also be jam-packed with jokes. The dad especially, but the entire family in Coda are hilarious, and the writing is really well done. As someone who despises Lock and Key as a TV show, literally only because I couldn't stand the child actors, Emilia Jones really does well as Ruby. It's like an Oscar-worthy performance, although deep down I know they'll never give it to her. Anyways, the concept of Ruby loving singing so much more than anything, but her family not having any idea if she's any good or even being able to appreciate her passion is a really cool dynamic.
This film isn't weird, it's very mainstream. For a drama that could be deep and emotional and very surreal or gritty, this movie is instead really pushed to be accessible to a general audience, which is a good move financially, as well as to get more people into film. I don't hate that choice at all, and for a movie that you've probably seen a million times, a teenage coming-of-age story, this movie executes it sublimely. This film doesn't shatter any glass ceilings in the coming-of-age genre, it doesn't expand the concept of a coming-of-age film, but it takes all the traditional tropes and turns them up a notch. You can take a normal 10 out of 10 coming-of-age story, but...
These go to 11.
I personally fucking love Wes Anderson, and at the Spotlight, we both do. So you can guess what we thought of this film. It's fucking fantastic. Every single aspect of a Wes Anderson movie, the color palette, the symmetrical framing, on-the-nose dialogue, lack of a traditional story, the longest tracking shots you've ever seen, and the lack of an actual narrative weight is turned up to 11. This is the Wes Andersoniest Wes Anderson flick I've ever seen, and I think I'm in love, although I will say, the whole older woman with the younger guy thing, it's getting a bit overused, isn't it? You wanna tone that back a little, Wes? Maybe turn that one down from 11.
The movie itself is a love letter to the concept of storytelling, and Wes executes it beautifully. The structure of this movie is genius. A 3-section anthology bookended by a short introduction and conclusion, following the form of the New Yorker magazines that Wes loved growing up. You can feel the amount of care that Wes put into this film. It's gorgeous. The story segments all have their own style, their own color palette, their own themes. No single segment is bad, although some segments are better than others. The case is obviously full of stars, and while similar to Dune, not all of them get a lot of screen time. There's not a bad performance in the lot. There's so much visual style to fall in love with. There's segments in 2D animation that just happen for seemingly no reason, but it's another nod to the concept of the New Yorker magazine, and just a great way for Wes to show what he can do.
Now, Wes Anderson doing his own style is pretty normal, it's par for the course. It's what you would expect from a Wes Anderson movie. But my favorite part by far is when he breaks his own style and goes into something different. There's one scene in this movie where he drops the symmetrical framing, the static face-on medium close-ups, and he has a dynamic, rotating camera around a dinner table as people eat. It's shot like a traditional movie without the Wesisms, and adds so much tension and enhances Wes's style to an insane degree. This movie is not Wes's best, but it's a good fucking time.
Coming in at number 7 is Last Night in Soho. Ha, suck it, losers. You thought that my last controversial take would be the Snyder Cut? Nope. We're all in on actually liking shitty 2021 horror movies. Except this one is leagues better than Malignant. Edgar Wright is just a very talented director. He switches genres every single film, and a lot of his movies are able to fit into a variety of genres, which is really cool. Last Night in Soho isn't his best work, but it's a really strong movie all around. It has great visual storytelling, fantastic performances, and an excellent cinematography.
Music is one of the most important parts of a movie. Good characters are really important, and dialogue can make or break a movie, and competent editing can really influence how a movie does, but I think when a movie uses music, especially non-diegetic music, I think it becomes one of the most important things about the movie. Music, both score and licensed. Most of my favorite movie moments and movies rely on music to make them work. Films like Guardians of the Galaxy, Baby Driver, have music the entire runtime, and that's why they work well and have so much heart. There's important scenes, like look at the slowed down remix of Toxic and Promising Young Woman. Or the opera scene in The Shawshank Redemption, the wave planet from Interstellar, the finale to Portrait of a Lady on Fire. All of these moments only become legendary because of the music choice.
There are also movies that are bad because of their usage of music. The most recent one is Cruella, but also look at the Justice League, Army of the Dead, and every single movie to play Mr. Blue Sky aside from Guardians. But Edgar Wright has had good work using music, especially with Baby Driver, which we mentioned above. And man, did he knock it out of the park with this soundtrack. The use of 60s music is great characterization for the lead, and it just sounds good. I think the opening of her dancing around her room to the sound of World Without Love is one of the most enjoyable and just happy scenes I have ever seen. It's a perfect wordless characterization for our lead.
I also really like the way the characters are presented. Eloise is a really strong protagonist, and you feel for her and you feel her struggle. It's partially through the music, partially through the directing, and partially through Thomason's brilliant performance, but we really empathize with Eloise. As for the antagonist, who we won't spoil, they're also really compelling and pretty sympathetic. And probably one of my favorite little parts, the love interest.
We've seen the horror movie trope of the female horror lead starts to see the enemy/monster everywhere, and then goes crazy, driving all of her family and friends away. And so many times we've seen that no one believes her, and the love interest or male friend thinks she's crazy and tries to gaslight her into thinking she's imagining it. It's so incredibly refreshing to have a male counterpart who doesn't for a second call her crazy or run away from her, but always believes her and does his best. It's a really good and cool character trope subversion.
The direction is stunning, unsurprisingly coming from Edgar Wright, and this time it's mostly the lighting. From the first trailer, we knew that lighting would be an important part of the movie, but it's the way that the flashing neon lights set the tone, as well as the many different scenes that are lit in different ways, especially in different areas of time. This movie just looks really good all around. It's a super fun, fairly scary, character-driven horror movie, and yet another absolute banger from Edgar Wright.
Did you watch Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and say to yourself, wow, I wish this film was directed by literally anyone other than Quentin Tarantino? If so, I present to you our number 6 pick, Licorice Pizza. It's yet another movie where the director lovingly recreates an era that defined their Hollywood. But this time, instead of Quentin Tarantino doing his whole foot thing, it's PTA making an actual film.
Licorice Pizza is just a fun film in a cool location where things just kind of happen to people. I love it. It's about young love and how messy and unsure it is, and about the concept of young love not being real love, but still being enough to make two people happy for a short time. It's just really well done and has no real problems. Aside from the big two problems that keep this movie out of the top 5 and made me even consider taking it off the fucking list.
So during this movie, out of the blue, there's a really weird racist joke towards Asians. And the thing is, you could remove that line from the movie and nothing would change. So, why didn't they fucking remove it from the script? The Media Action Network for Asian Americans is calling for a boycott of this movie, so it's obviously a big deal. I mean, your racist joke doesn't even serve the plot in some demonstration of the times. Then why is it in the movie? And the other problem with this movie is the weird pseudo-glorification of a weird age gap relationship. Now, you can perceive this movie as condemning it if you try, but also if you try, it looks like the movie is glorifying it. It's a call me by your name problem, and is the only reason this movie isn't in the number 1 spot.
This year's number 5 movie is about a serial killer who fucks and then gets impregnated by her car and has a metal plate in her head, I think. It's Teton. From Julia Ducournau, the director of the almost equally bizarre Raw, comes one of the best body horror movies ever. Period. It's a film reminiscent of David Lynch's work, and it comes at a surprisingly compelling story that requires many, many watches to properly understand, but a super strong emotional core too.
I encourage you to watch this movie blind. It's really weird, and the plot doesn't make a lot of sense. If you've seen this movie, or fuck it, if you know that you're too lazy to actually check it out, then go ahead and read the Wikipedia summary. It's so weird. I've said that already. God, it's hard to talk about this movie.
Look, if you liked Raw, this is a movie that's just that movie, but better in every conceivable way. Not that Raw was bad, but this is just better. It's really good. It just feels like Julia is now more in command of her direction and story than she was before. This is a fully realized vision of a movie, and I can't entirely say what it's all about without spoiling it, obviously, but it's really cool. Check it out.
A24 is a lot of good movies. Unsurprisingly, they're taking the number 4 spot with The Green Knight. The Green Knight stands out as the first truly good movie I saw this year. 2021 was very slow for film, but it picked up a lot as the year went on. The Green Knight is a patient and calm retelling of a 14th century English legend, and it's in my top 5 A24 movies, somewhere among Midsummer, Lady Bird, Moonlight, and The Farewell.
This movie addresses themes of knighthood, responsibility, and it explores age and the inevitability of death in a way better than even Old without trying to. Chronologically, it's a continuation of Lowry's earlier work, a ghost story, but this one is much more subtle and without that huge monologue that was completely unnecessary in the middle of Ghost Story. We have a full video on this already, so we don't need to go into too much detail, but we just really like this movie a lot. I think I've seen it like 3 times now, and it's just, you know, chef's kiss. The ending is also one of the strongest this year, maybe the strongest, and it's one of my favorite endings to any movie since The Sound of Metal or Portrait of a Lady on Fire. It's fucking nuts, man, I'm telling you.
The unsureness of what's real and what's not, the brilliant use of color, the ethereal score, and the rich world building leads to one of the most otherworldly movie experiences you'll ever have this year. The movie subtly addresses knighthood and the 5 pillars that make it up without you even realizing it. The movie consists of Dev Patel experiencing seemingly random encounters on his way to challenge the Green Knight. And only after finishing do you start to connect the encounters together and realize the overarching themes. While it may not be the very best movie of the year, it's definitely the one that stuck with me the longest and kept me thinking even more than some movies which we consider better.
Hi guys, this is Emerald in editing, and I actually didn't see The Power of Dog until just now, which is why it's not on the list. It's really good. If I had seen it before recording the script, I would put it right here at number 4, just above The Green Knight. It's a really solid western that I recommend, but we saw it too late into the year, so fuck you guys, it's not making the list. Sorry. With that said, the number 3 spot goes to Nomadland, another movie that people forgot came out this year, technically. Technically it was at festivals before that actually, but I didn't see it then. I saw it this year, so it's going on the list. Anyways, it won Best Picture, so it shouldn't be a huge surprise, but this is a really good movie. Chloe Zhao may have kind of fucked up Eternals a little bit, but we can easily blame Marvel and Disney for that, because she knocked it out of the fucking park, and into another park with this movie.
First of all, it's gorgeous. The cinematography puts you exactly in the shoes of Frances McDormand, playing Frances McDormand, and it's breathtaking to watch. This movie is so quietly powerful, and like The Green Knight, perfectly content to let each scene breathe, and keep the pace almost painfully slow, and it works perfectly.
I'm also just a huge fan of this style of storytelling. It's neither plot motivated nor character motivated, it's just kind of things happening. Kind of like the middle section of The Green Knight if you think about it. This style is really relaxing and deeply realistic to what we see in our own lives, even if we're not in the same exact situation as Frances McDormand playing Frances McDormand. I mean, there's not much more to say, it's a well-deserved win at the Oscars, it's a solid movie. In case you're wondering why I'm considering this a movie from 2021 while not, say, I don't know, One Night in Miami, it's because this list is completely arbitrary and I don't care. I'm basing these off what year I watched them in, so you can shut the fuck up. Please and thank you.
After the last bunch of movies being dark, brooding, mostly plotless stories, comes yet another mostly plotless movie. Noticing a pattern? Yep. Except instead of being dark and soul-haunting, this film is light-hearted, fall-colored, pumpkin spice latte of a movie. It's just really fun.
Portrait of a Lady on Fire is my favorite movie ever, bar none. It's a beautiful film that is maybe one of the most tragic love stories I've ever seen. Scratch that, it is the most tragic love story I've ever seen. I remember the first time I finished it, I sat in silence for hours afterwards, in just shock and awe. It was a heartbreaking masterpiece, and in every way that Portrait of a Lady on Fire was heartbreaking and tragic, Petite Maman, Siam's most recent film, is inspiring and heartwarming. It's a gorgeous autumn-colored movie featuring themes of motherhood, family, and friendship, and it's one of the happier movies you're gonna see this year, even if it has a few darker undertones.
While the protagonist is not necessarily on fire in this movie, she gives off the smoldering warmth of an October campfire, as do the stunning fall colors this movie is graded with. It's shot beautifully, as can be expected, and Petite Maman especially has a perfect feel for its own tone. There are somber moments that are framed beautifully, but the whimsical feeling of the movie is perfectly captured. The colors and camera movements stunningly capture the joy of childhood.
Now don't get me wrong, this movie stands completely good on its own, but it does draw some comparisons to When Marnie Was There, the last good Ghibli movie, because we don't talk about the last one. If you enjoyed that movie, this movie is probably better than that in every other way, aside from it not being animated, which is unfortunate, but whatever. The themes of that movie are still present here, but are more fleshed out and feel slightly different in context. That's about all I can say without getting into spoilers, but as always, check it out.
This movie is joyous, triumphant, and probably the best movie to come out this year, with the exception of the #1 spot.
Needless to say, it's been a good year for A24. They've already showed up 3 times on this list, and they also made the best movie of the year. It's Red Rocket. Red Rocket is a fantastic movie about a male porn star without the direction of PTA. It's surprising, I know. Also, side note, if you haven't seen Boogie Nights, check that out, it's also really good. Anyways, this is a dirty movie. Not in a sexual sense, well, I mean yes, in a sexual sense, but also in the sense that this movie just feels gross to watch. Mikey Saber, a fully realized character performed to perfection by Simon Rex, is a bad person and you kind of feel gross just watching him. But Sean Baker pulls out all the stops and makes you root for him and like him despite his innate grossness. You're both disgusted by him because he's awful, yet you feel for him through the direction, his story, and the charisma. His life is falling apart and you kind of just want things to turn out for him. But he's still awful, don't forget that he's still awful.
This movie manages to both have a strong emotional core and have a whole lot of fun with itself. It's hilarious and self-aware and one of the funniest movies to come out of this year, and the fact that the dramatic through-line is so strong is a miracle in and of itself. Red Rocket has a powerful message about how the world tends to put you down yet keep you trying to get back up. Because as much shit goes wrong for Mickey, he's still trying his goddamn best to make it out okay on the other side.
This is another film that doesn't really bother itself with a huge moving character arc where our lead learns the error of his ways. This is just a grounded story about Mikey learning absolutely nothing about himself, yet continuing to wake up and get punches from the world. It's just a strong message with great characters and some awesome writing. And man, that ending is fucking fantastic. It doesn't quite top The Green Knight since that movie fell right into my niche, but man, does Sean Baker know how to end a movie.
Like Licorice Pizza, this is a hangout movie of things just happening to people, and it's a good time. Unlike Licorice Pizza, however, when it toes the line with shit that isn't okay, it's very clear that it's condemning it. Like we said, Mickey fucking sucks, and for most of this movie, you see all the predatory shit and you're like, is this allowed? And this is probably Baker's most accessible film, so that's kinda nuts, but yeah, that's not okay. We all know that Mickey is a dick and an opportunist and a creep. But that's what this movie is about. This movie is dark, gritty, and disgusting, yet hilarious and fun, and has as much tension as Uncut fucking Gems, and is the best film of this year.
Thank you so much for joining in our top 21 list. Feel free to comment your own list and we'd love to see what you think. Also, feel free to give a shit in our list, see if I fucking care. Anyways, we have a lot of video planned and a new series of shorter, more consistent uploads starting in I don't know, late spring? I've honestly no idea. Anyways, we may do a second channel trailer now that we have a more solid idea of what we want to do with this channel. Anyways, thank you all so much. I've been Emerald.
I'm Henry.
And this has been
The Spotlight.